Hello from our side. We are sitting in Vienna. It's now sunny again after kind of thunderstorms and strong rain the last days. Today we are going to speak about the NATO application framework version 4 and how to use it with Enterprise Architect. With me is Horst Kage, but first I will introduce myself. My name is Peter Lieber. I'm CEO of Spark Systems in Europe. I'm the founder of entrepreneurs of some companies, but my focus is, of course, enterprise architect. Currently, I'm vice president of the Austrian Association of Software Industry, and yeah, Horst is next to me. I will introduce him. He will come later, of course. He is our head of training and principal consultant since decades already, somehow. And he does modeling since 1998. So after 2 years of UML introduction publication, he started modeling and works with Sparks since 2006. So 3 years after founding Sparks in Europe, he was already working with us. He was a research engineer at the Technical University of Vienna, and now he is hired, of course, and in the leading position. His main topics are a lot of, he comes originally from software engineering, so he knows quite a lot, or maybe sometimes too much, about the scenes behind the scenes. A lot of languages he has used already. He is one of our trainers using NATO application framework also in training situations. And we have also, he implemented some of the modeling assistance and learned a lot about how to adapt enterprise architect for various customers in real world. For this session, we will have, there was a primer session some years ago, 4 years ago, on my birthday in 2020, when the Swiss Army, together with the German Army, was introducing the NATO Enterprise Architecture Framework, the NATO Architecture Framework to a wider audience. This video is available either on the Sparks website, but you will find it also in the YouTube channel. And it was really first time in the world that the Swiss Army and the German Army were introducing a new technology based on Enterprise Architect together. And we are proud to be allowed to host the model framework, the adoption of the German Army on our website in Europe as well. We will discuss about the differences and the commonalities between UAF and NAF. So I think maybe you have heard about the UAF framework and the NATO application framework. We will discuss about the origins and how it comes to that situation. And we will also touch the similarities with other standardized modeling frameworks, and especially how to deal with that in enterprise architect environments. Of course, our focus will be, as it's EA Global Summit, how to use it in Enterprise Architect. And we try to offer some best practices or some possibilities how to deal with a framework and how to interoperate with the NATO application framework together and across with other frameworks. The general purpose of the NATO application framework, especially in version 4, was some goals. It was originated by military, but also for industry use. And the purpose was to make a uniform architecture management with a focus on mission and joint operations. It includes requirements, and this is the new thing in version 4, of course. And also there is a lot of influence from the Archimate language and also from TOGAF. You will see it later a little bit how this historical point of view. And it tries to align and aligns with international standards like the OMG, TOG, ISO, and others to fulfill their focus and need in the context of NATO. In real world, there are quite a lot of frameworks. So NATO application frameworks is not the first framework and will not be the last one. A very famous one is Zuckman framework, especially in the English area. So it's UK originated. So it was already in 88, very early. And yes, it was very early. Then there was TODAF and MOGAF and so on. So maybe we go to this visualization, where we try to make a visibility of how this framework and this number of frameworks were involved over time. So Zachman was in 1987, so almost near. Longer than I'm in a working position, so I was 14 then. Oh my goodness. So, and Zachman is, I think he's still alive and he's still active somehow. And he influenced quite a lot of frameworks that were involved later. Some years later, TOGAF was implemented. TOGAF is originated by the Open Group. And you see that there is a similarity of the frameworks. And there was by Department of Defense, DoD, application framework that was introduced in 2003, 8. And then military operations, as MODA framework, name it shortly, but very fast they identified it makes sense to have a global collaboration on that. In parallel, there was some influence by Archimate. So Archimate is 2009 or something like that. As a lightweight, I would name it. They don't like the word. It's a not 100% language, but a language that is easier to understand and to use because it just focuses on elements and not too many attributes, and it makes it easier to maintain high-level architecture. And this was a strong influence also for the NATO application framework version 4. So what happens with the German army? The German army make a German thing out of it. So EDMBV for the German army has its influence and origin from NATO application framework 3.1. That is a lot of influence of UML, so a lot of details and classification that are very deep dive from a technical point of view, but also borrows elements from NATO application version 4 and tries to make this high-level visualization compatible. And what you also see that UAF 1.0, what is the result of all the architecture frameworks before, more or less, unified application framework, is an influence to NATO application framework 4. You can even say it's kind of a subset or a derivation of UAF. We will have more clarification on that with Horst deep dive. So I hand over to Horst as it goes to details.
Okay, thank you. Good. Now let's have okay. Now let's have a closer look at this part of this historical picture here. The NATO Architecture Framework 4 is somehow related to the architecture data model of the German army and has its origin in the Universal Architecture Framework and Archimate, influenced by Archimate, not necessarily by the language itself, but more by the framework itself, or the framework parts of Archimate. So we have the Universal Architecture Framework and its meta model called the domain meta model. And then we have the NATO Architecture Framework. And there is a possibility to use the Universal Architecture Framework, UAF, to model NAF v4 models. Yeah. So because it's described in this document, so the NATO Architecture Framework version 4.4, modeling guidelines for use of the UAF DMM. So how to use the UAF language to model NATO Architecture Framework 4.0. Yeah, so you can use UAF instead of the implementation of the NATO architecture framework as well. So there's a strong relation between these languages. Many of the language concepts appear in the UAF same way as they appear in the NATO architecture framework. The mapping is described in this document. So you see that the NATO architecture framework grid is somehow traceable to the URF grid. Both languages are UML based. And on the next slide, by the way, NATO architecture, the RDMBW implementation of the NATO architecture framework is also a kind of a subset or extension of the NAF v4. In the context of Enterprise Architect, if you would like to use it and download it, you will find the NAF core and then NAF RDMBW MDG technology. NAF core is the actual NATO architecture framework 4.0, and NAF RDMBW is the German implementation of it or extensions. Good. So in general, when we talk about frameworks, or especially the NATO architecture framework, frameworks come with rows and columns. So in the NATO architecture framework, we have the columns, which are called the aspect of concerns, and the rows are called subject or perspectives of concerns. And this matrix, or the cells of this matrix, are the actual viewpoints. So each cell of this matrix is a kind of viewpoint. So this is very familiar with other frameworks as well, but in the NATO architecture framework, we talk about aspects of concern and subject of concern and viewpoints. Yeah. And this is the UAF grid and all its viewpoints compared to the NATO architecture framework. Yeah, so it looks already smaller if we compare them each to each other. So we have on the left-hand side the NATO architecture framework 4.0 and the universal architecture framework. The NATO architecture framework has 5 rows and 8 columns, so we have 40 viewpoints. And the UAF has 10 rows and 9 columns and additional 2 columns and 2 rows. Yeah, so a lot. And if you have a closer look at, you can't read it, but I will read it for you. So the first column here in the NATO architecture framework is called taxonomy. We find also a taxonomy in UAF. Second one is called structure. So we will find a structure. Third one is connectivity. So we have also connectivity. So most of the columns directly match the NATO architecture framework. The sequence in NATO architecture framework is the interaction in UAF. The rows are called a little bit different, but from the viewpoints and the elements which can be used. Sorry. There is this subset possibility which is described in this document. And then there are also other frameworks like the SACMA framework. This is how the SACMA framework looks like. So here we also have rows and columns, but here we have data, functions, network, people, time, and motivation in the columns, and scope, business model, system model, technology model, details, and so on in the rows. So this was the first, one of the first frameworks which exists, and all the other are based on this, more or less. Here, another framework, the MODAF and DODAF. Here we are already in this part of the history. Again, we have the rows and we have also columns, but not that structured as the newer frameworks or other frameworks. The predecessor of the NATO architecture framework 4.0 is NAF 3, which also has more or less the similar viewpoints we have already, but a little bit different structured. And that's the NATO architecture framework. Actually not. This is already the ADMBW, so the architecture data model of the German army. And you see that there is an additional row, the requirements row, added to it. And for the ADMBW, the German army and the Swiss army, they have developed an approach. Yeah. So there is an approach for operational architecture called analysis phase 1. There is an approach for system architecture, analysis phase 2. Then system architecture realization and system architecture usage. And you see that based on the specific approach, if you are in the analysis phase or if in the analysis phase 2 or realization or usage phase, you use different viewpoints of the framework. So if you have an operational architecture analysis, you start or you use C1, C2, but not 3, 4, 5, and 7, 8, and CR again, and so on. And in the other phases, you will use different viewpoints. And if we take out one of these approaches, there is not just the views or viewpoints which are important for this phase. There is also a process behind. So there is a document which describes with viewpoint you should start and which should be the next one. And yeah, how these viewpoints are related to each other is described already in the.
And what is very interesting in this case is that you see that you start from the bottom. So start at the bottom, go to the top, go to the middle, and then you fulfill the requirements and go back to the bottom again. So it's more a straightforward process, but it's interesting how you navigate through the framework.
Yeah, so it's not from left top corner to the right bottom corner. So it depends on the stakeholder and the stakeholder point of view, which is the next slide. Yeah, so we have different viewpoints and views. So here, this is the framework, yeah, the aspects and subjects. And then we have these viewpoints. So each of the cells is a specific viewpoint, interesting for a specific stakeholder. Yeah, so different stakeholders may be interested in different viewpoints. And the viewpoint itself just tells me what information should be represented to a stakeholder. Behind the viewpoint, we have the views. And we can have multiple views for a specific viewpoint. Yeah, which means we have the model repository. So like in Enterprise Architect, the Enterprise Architect repository, we have the NATO Architecture Framework model elements, which are connected based on the meta model of the NATO Architecture Framework with the rules and guidelines which are contained and constraints which are in the framework. And then we can show them in the specific views, like we have just a subset of these elements and show it in a specific view, which is more or less a diagram. And then we have other elements and show it in other diagrams and so on. Yeah, and these diagrams are related to a specific viewpoint. Yeah. The question is now, which comes always first when you start modeling with a modeling tool, how should I organize my project browser, my model structure? Same here. We have a framework which gives me already the viewpoints and possible views, or the information for a specific stakeholder and a specific diagram with a toolbox, what should be used in this diagram or what should be shown. But the framework doesn't tell me how to structure or organize the Enterprise Architect repository. So if you go to the German Army, they have kind of template repositories. But I would like to point out the different approaches and specific facts about the structure of different approaches and how we can cope with this. So, but first, where to find the NATO Architecture Framework? So you can go to the Sparks page, sparksystems.eu. You can go to the hamburger button, which opens this page. And in this page, you see add-in for Spark Systems UML tool, which opens this page here. And here you see all the extensions, and the NATO Architecture Framework is an extension, an MDG technology extension. If you click on this, you get to this page, and here you can download it. So then you have the package with the MDG technology, also a few other documents like the UML profile description is also contained, and a document about the NATO Architecture Framework, which you can also find online as well. But here it's bundled together. So how to bring it into Enterprise Architect? There are different ways. First, the best way is to just create a new Enterprise Architect repository, open the resource view in Enterprise Architect, which is in the latest versions a ribbon in the project browser. So the browser, so it's a project browser and also the resource browser. So if you open the browser window, go to resources, then select MDG technologies. In the context menu, you can import an MDG technology, which opens this dialog. And here you browse to the folder, which is a zip you have to extract. And if the zip is extracted, you point to the MDG technology. And then you import it. There are two ways. You can import it to the model, or you can also import it to the user. So if you import it to the model, the MDG lives within the model and is only available within this Enterprise Architect repository. If you import it to the user, it's available for all the Enterprise Architect repositories you open. It's up to you which approach you would like to have. Usually we import it into the model because The architecture, the NATO architecture framework, especially the ADMBW, comes in different releases. So latest one is 2024-06. There will be a new version coming at least next year. And if you have a repository with the MDG technology, then it's good to have this version of the NATO architecture framework in one repository. If you would like to go with a newer one, you can import it into another repository, and you have always the proper version. If you import it to the user, you have all NATO architecture framework versions available, and then you have to choose the proper one. Good. And the next step is, you have to learn the framework. Then you can use it, and you can learn it by just reading the documents, the specifications, or book a training. The documents can easily be found. I told you already, when you download the NATO architecture framework, you will get already most important PDFs, which describes the framework. But you can also find them online. So this here is, so I need to, okay, need to, here we are. So now I can click on it. Okay, hyperlink is not working. It's always at the, so turn it off, the laser pointer. Now it should work. Yes, okay. So here we have the web page with all the documents. If I open the document, so that's the description of the NATO architecture framework 4.0. There is a similar document for the ADMBW. And here we have a whole description, introduction. So what is architecture in general? The methodology about the NATO architecture framework. And there is also a description about the viewpoints. So it starts on page 70. So I will directly jump to it. Okay, so introduction, the framework again, and then all the different viewpoints are described and explained, also with examples. So if we go here, so C1, capability view, the capability taxonomy. So here we have different capabilities, the search and rescue capability, for instance. Then we have the maritime search and rescue, land search and rescue, high mountain search and rescue, and a generalization. So in the ADMBW, the generalization looks like an UML generalization. Here it looks different, but it's called generalization. So it's an inheritance hierarchy. So we have a hierarchy of capabilities. So this is what the viewpoint C1 is used for. So we think about, okay, what capabilities do we need for our mission? And then we can drill it down to more fine-grained capabilities. In the next viewpoint, C2, we talk about it's a kind of roadmap. It's called whole life enterprise. It's an element. By the way, it's based on UML. So most of the elements are classes, instances, or properties with stereotypes. Also ports are used and activities and sequence diagrams. So these are the core UML concepts which are used in the NATO architecture framework. So if you are familiar with UML, so it's already easier to get to all these concepts in the NATO architecture framework. NATO architecture framework is well defined, also implemented in Enterprise Architect. Like there are special use cases, special connector use cases. So the quick linker are easy to use because there's always exactly one connector which should be used between elements, or just a subset or a few connectors which can be and should be used between the elements. So the C2 diagram viewpoint is, as mentioned already, it's a roadmap which tells me that in this mission, I have different phases, which I'll call the enterprise phase, which have a start state and an end state. And in each phase, I would like to achieve different capabilities. So here we can plan our mission and the capabilities we would like to have achieved during this time. C3, for instance, and we stay in the row of the capabilities. So here we describe the dependencies between capabilities. You see that the view is just a projection of the model data. So this is something we got already from C1. So we have the search and rescue capability, and there is a more special one, maritime search and rescue, which contains other capabilities. Yeah, so there are dependencies which can be shown as nested, and there are dependencies which can be shown with the connectors. Yeah. So this search and rescue C2, which it's not the C2 view. I think it comes from the military. So this C2 is depending on the military C2 capability, which depends on the maritime search and rescue, and so on. So this is what you can learn from this document. So the framework itself is explained. You get examples and a description of the examples. Good. Or you book a training. Yeah. So here, this is our academy with all the trainings we have, and there is also a training for the NATO architecture framework. So I also opened the page. So here it's the NATO architecture framework with a detailed description. So there's also the English version. So we switch to English. What you will learn, the objectives, content. So all the trainings are separated in language parts, tool parts, methodology parts, methods, and best practices, the experiences we have. Yeah, by the way, next date is in October. So if you would like to learn NATO architecture framework, visit the page. And we use, we use also an e-learning platform for our courses. So we have here for the NATO architecture framework, ADMBW, a course. So here we also have an English and a German one, and we also have a NAF core, which is the actual NAF framework. Yeah, so that's the ADMBW version, and that's the core version. And if we have a look at this, so how these trainings are organized. So here again, we give an introduction into the framework itself. You also learn the basic concepts which are used in the framework itself, like packages, how to work with packages, classes, objects, parts, ports, activities, state machine, sequence diagram, BPMN. Yeah, by the way, BPMN is also part of the NATO architecture framework, subset of it. So this is foundation of the NATO architecture framework, and then we have also the different viewpoints and rows of the NATO architecture framework and example and exercises for it. Good. But now let's go back to the initial question, how to structure the project browser. So we know now a little bit about what is NATO architecture framework, how does models look like. Here we have the framework. And by the way, all these thoughts we do now can also be applied to other frameworks. Yeah. So in the NATO architecture framework, we have this viewpoints, the views, and the model, and how should the project browser look like. We can do it the straightforward approach. So we use packages as always. So we use a package for rows, we use a package for viewpoints, and we use diagrams for views. Yeah, and the framework elements will be used or created in the diagrams, so they will be contained in the viewpoints package. Yeah, So like here, this is the package for the row, and there is also, so that's the C row, which contains now the package for the viewpoint, and the diagram is the view. So for capability taxonomies, I have 3 views in one package. Good. If I fill it with data, it looks like this. So here again, I have, this is the S row for services, S1 service taxonomy. I have 2 diagrams, the green and the blue one, and I've created elements. So if I create the elements in this diagram, the elements will be contained in the package which contains the diagrams. So all of them will be nested in the S1 service taxonomy package. Good. And this is a more conceptual structure, a kind of domain or meta model about this project browser structure here. So we have the framework views, which is an enterprise architect package, which contains the rows of the framework, which is again an enterprise architect package. So I need to turn on my laser pointer again, and you also see my mouse cursor. So then we have the viewpoint, which is again an enterprise architect package, which contains the diagram. Yeah. And if I create something within this diagram, so the diagram is referencing the model element, and the model element is contained in this viewpoint package. So here we have a structure for the views, and here we have the structure for the model data. And now we have a few facts. Yeah. In the first version of this document or this presentation, I wrote benefits and drawbacks, but it's not always so easy to state that this is a benefit or this is a drawback, because it always depends on what and how you would like to use the model. So I just decided to go with facts. So there are some facts. Like one fact is the default. So to go with this approach, this is the default behavior of enterprise architect. Yeah? Especially you create an element in a diagram, and the element will be contained in the container of the diagram. So that's the rule. This is how enterprise architect is working out of the box. All elements which are created directly in the diagram contained in the package will be in the package. Yeah. So it's easy to create import and XMI imports and export, or create baselines. Yeah, because we have everything contained in the package, the diagram, the model elements. But then the model elements will be scattered or distributed over the whole model or the repository. Because you saw that in C1, I have created capabilities, or I can use capabilities, but I can also create capabilities in C3, yeah, because I have the capability dependencies. And maybe I need an additional capability, and I create it in C3, then the capability lives in the package viewpoint v3. So all the elements are distributed over the whole repository. So that's a fact. It could be a drawback, but maybe not. Yeah. It's harder to import and export elements of the same type. So if I would like to get all my capabilities exported, yeah, so if they are not contained in one single package, it's not that easy. Harder to find existing elements. So because if I'm looking for a specific capability I have already created, I need to have a look in all the packages to find it. If everything is contained in one single package, I just have to look at this package. But model search could be a solution for it. Yeah, and this list of facts is not complete, so we can, if we sit together and think about other facts, I'm sure we will find a lot of them. So now let's think about and try to separate the framework elements from the views and keep it in a kind of library. Because most of the frameworks go this way, that there are the views, and then you have a library of model elements which can be used in the views. But here we have distributed the elements in different packages. So we would like to have framework elements in viewpoints in a separated structure. Yeah, like here This is the view structure, and I have added an element structure, the framework elements. And for each of the rows, I have a package, and for each of the elements, I have a dedicated package. So here I collect all my capabilities. So then I have a single point of information. Here I find all my capabilities. If I'm looking for a capability, I know where to do this. So this is the model, how it could look like. So again, I am in a view of the viewpoint C1, show the capability hierarchy, but all the model elements are contained in this capability package, in this framework elements part. So this was the previous structure, and now we change it to this. So we bend the nesting connector here from, it's not, the framework element is not nested in the viewpoint package of the view. We nest it in the element type package of the framework, which is part of the framework elements package. The reference from the diagram to this element, it's the same. Yeah. So this is just the usage of an element in a diagram. Okay, again, we have facts like all elements of the same type are now in the same package, in the same place. So that's fact. It's easy to baseline and import, export all elements of the same type. Yeah. I just select the capability package, say make baseline or import or export. But in order to keep them all in the same package, I need to reorganize my project browser over and over again. So whenever I create something, I can do it in two ways. So I create it somewhere and then I move it down, or I create it in the first place in the capability package and then I reuse it somewhere. So it's a method point of view. So it depends on, so if we do it manually, a solution could also be, Enterprise Architect has a powerful API which can be used to do that job automatically. Another fact is, so if we create now a baseline of the views, the views doesn't contain the elements. So, if you baseline something which is not part of the baseline, baseline compare will not show the differences. Yeah? Because the baseline only contains the elements of a package and its sub. Import export package with view diagram do not contain the elements. So if I export the viewpoints package or the row, whatever, the framework, I just get the diagrams with if you import it in another Enterprise Architect, just placeholder elements if placeholder is configured. Okay, list is not complete, so we can think about something else as well. But the framework, NATO Architecture Framework 4.0, contains first-class model elements called viewpoint and views. So there is already something in the framework itself as a model element, like a viewpoint and a view. So we have used, or I have used packages to represent viewpoints and views. So how does this viewpoint element and view element fits? Yeah, here by the way, the viewpoint is exactly the framework viewpoint. So interesting information for a stakeholder, and the view represents exactly one diagram, and this view complies to a specific viewpoint, and a viewpoint can have multiple of these views. So what we saw in the sketch in previous slides. Okay, so how could the project browser look if we go with this approach? So we could now use the viewpoint element, make it composite. So we have a composite viewpoint element as the framework's viewpoint. We use the view element, make it composite. So we have a composite view element as the views. And then we have the framework elements based on the built-in rule in Enterprise Architect. If we create an element within a diagram, and this is now the view diagram, which is contained in the view element, the framework element will live in the view elements. So they will be nested below it. Okay, how does it look like? So here again, so I have the views of the framework, and instead of the packages, I have used the viewpoint element for all the viewpoints. So this is the C1 capability taxonomy viewpoint, C1 to S1. So this is a bridge, C3 capability dependency, and so on. And the viewpoints contain now the views. So it could be empty if there is no view, but if there's a view, and the view represents the diagram. So it's always a combination. One view has one diagram. Yeah? But a viewpoint can have multiple views. Yeah? So multiple diagrams. Okay. So here we have the viewpoints and the views. And the views now are elements which contains the diagrams. So the conceptual project meta model structure is like this. Again, so we have the framework, which is the package. Then we have a model element, which is the viewpoint, which is nested in the framework. So here, the viewpoint C1 is nested in my view package. And the viewpoint contains the view element. So that's the view 1 and view 2 element. And there is a connection, the complies connection. So this is this connection here between the view element and the viewpoint. And the viewpoint and the view has composite diagrams. So these two are the diagrams, the composite diagrams. And this is the diagram what we see here, the viewpoint diagram, which contains the view and the viewpoint element as a reference. So here we have the viewpoint and the views. This is important to be able to see the connections and to create the connections. Yeah, it's not necessary to see the connections, but it's good to have the connector because then you have the information also stated in the model. And because we create the framework elements within the view diagram, so it's referenced within the view diagram, and the view diagram is nested in the view, the framework element will automatically be nested as well in the view. So that's the basic behavior from the proceeding. Again, the facts. So now we are using the view and viewpoint elements of the NATO architecture framework to represent our framework. All the elements created in a composite diagram view will be nested within the view elements. Yeah, that's the default behavior. When we create the composite diagrams of the view and the viewpoint, we have to follow a specific method because the viewpoint is a stereotype and the view is a stereotype. Yeah. In the MDG technology, we could configure that for this stereotype, the composite diagram should be a special type. But in this case, we need, or the viewpoint will have the different, or especially the view, will have different diagrams based on the viewpoint. Yeah, because if it's a C1 viewpoint, the view needs to have a C1 diagram type. Yeah, so and we cannot configure this on the UML profile level or the diagram profile level because, or UML profile level, because here the view stereotype can just have one defined composite diagram type. But here we would need different one. The solution is the method is here that we select the view element in the project browser, create the diagram first. So if we are in C1, we create a new view element selected in project browser and create a C1 diagram. So now we have the diagram already below, and then we make this element composite, and Enterprise Architect will link automatically the diagram below. Or we can think about any other automation which implements this method. Yeah, we have an element representing a view and need an additional diagram for the actual view. So now we have duplicated. We have an element representing the view, but in order to really have the piece of paper which shows something, we need an additional diagram. So we have to have always this nested structure here. Yeah. Okay, that's another fact. Good. Same as with the first approach. Now we can try, because here we have now a mixture between view and model. So everything is nested somehow, because in the view representation, we have already model elements of the framework. Yeah. Let's try to rip them apart and see how this could look like. So we would like to have the framework elements in viewpoints separated, in a viewpoint separated structure. Okay, so this is what we have so far with this view and viewpoint elements. And now we can try to make it this way. So here the view only consists of the framework views and the diagram, which references the viewpoint elements and the view elements. And both of them are in this model data structure, so in the framework element data, which is a package. Here for each element type, so we have an element type viewpoint, we have an element type package view, we have an element type for each of the framework elements. So that's nested here, and the rest of the structure is still the same. Of course, this is not a clear separation, because here we also have diagrams. So the viewpoint element has its diagram, and the view model element has its diagram, because this is bound together. So each view has exactly one view diagram, which contains the model elements, but the model elements here now are nested again in the library package. So this is actually my model library of the framework. So how could it look like? So we have here the diagram. So this is this one, the framework diagram, and then we have the model structure, the elements. It's the package below, and all the different rows and model element. Like here, this is the architecture element row, and it contains a package for all the view elements. It contains a package for all the viewpoints. So strictly separated by element type. And that's the diagram below this viewpoint element, which contains these elements, and these elements are already nested in the container package for the views. We can also think about other approaches. So this is the fourth and the last separation here. We could also think about to say that, okay, the view elements could be nested below the viewpoints because they are really part of it. They are connected. So we have already the connection. So the information is still here. Even if we separate the view and the viewpoints, we have this connection. But we can also nest it below, but then we again mix the different types of model elements. But that's another fact. So here I keep it short. I would like to have a look at the time. Okay, we have 10 minutes left. So most of the facts are the same as the other one, but here we have incorporated the view and viewpoints elements, and the other facts like the separation or the how to organize the model elements and structure. We have the same facts as with the other approaches. Now I would like to talk about how to cope with all these facts, depending if it's a drawback or if it's a benefit. We don't have to cope with it, we just live and love it. But if it's a drawback from our points of view, how to can cope with it, like if the elements are distributed over the model and we would like to find the proper elements, we can use the model search or even the model views to have this artificial or this dynamic structure of grouping independent where the model elements live in the project browser. In the model view, we can group it by a search. Or if we would like to collect the model elements in a dedicated element types package, it's a lot of manual work and methods we have to follow. Of course, we can manually do the job, so that's the effort, or we can use the Enterprise Arctic API to automatically structure it. And in combination, Enterprise Arctic API and events, we can also do it on the fly. If we just use the API, we write a function, click on the button, and whenever we have clicked the button, everything gets cleaned up. If we use events, then it's done immediately and on the fly. Okay, so model search, quick wrap-up introduction. So this could be an approach. We don't care where the model elements live in the project browser. We just open the model search. We have a predefined search. In this case, I have defined a search element by stereotype. So then I can type capability, then I get a list of all the capabilities in my model. Yeah. And because the search window also allows me to filter the result set. So here I get all the capabilities, but I can also filter for a specific capability I'm looking for, like the disaster management. So I just type here disaster and I will get it. And then I can drag and drop it into the diagram and use it. So I don't care where the model elements live and use the model search. Of course, I have always model search open and I need to follow this process, this method, but can cope with it. In addition to that, I can also configure the model view, which lives now in the window focus. So if you're looking for a model view and use the search functionality in Enterprise Architect, if you search for model view, you will not find it anymore. You have to search for focus. So it's the window which contains the model view. The rest is still the same. So in the model view, we can add a search folder. The search folder is reusing an existing model search. So we are using the element with stereotype. The search folder can also apply a search value. So here we get a search folder for all the capabilities and we get the same result list. Drawback of the model view, there is no way to filter it, to search within. Like if you imagine that you have 200 capabilities, so it will get long, yeah. But at least you have a dedicated place for all the capabilities, independent where this capability is located in the project browser. Okay, now if the elements should be collected in a predefined package, yeah, you can manually do this. The approach would be you select a package, or you just, the model structure needs to be open. Then you go to the project browser and drag and drop the element from the toolbox into this package, or even better, we configure the diagram within this package to be opened as list view. So that's the list view here on the right side of the diagram. So it looks like the search view, but without the search view. So we don't need a search. So we see everything which is contained here in this capability package. We have also the possibility to filter. So if we have 500 capabilities, we can still filter them. And then we can also drag and drop from the toolbox new elements into this list, and they will be created in the package because the diagram is contained in the package. And because now the element is also contained in the diagram, it will be shown in the list. And then I can again drag and drop a specific element like this disaster management into the diagram and reuse it. Good. We can also use the API. Just write a script. So here with the scripting feature like NAF for field scripting, auto nesting elements, write whatever you like based on the method you would like to follow. And from time to time you run the script and the model is cleaned up. Pretty simple, straightforward. Or you can use Enterprise Architect and events, to automatically reorganize the model based on nesting rules. You can do this with the model add-in, which is based on JavaScript and lives in the model, as the name says, or you can use a COM-based add-in. Both approaches support events. Now, I show you an example, what we have already with a COM-based add-in, which is often used in our trainings for this kind of frameworks, like it's called modeling assistance. And in the modeling assistance, we have the possibility to use the auto nesting, which comes with a configuration. So here we can configure packages and elements which should be nested in this package. So it's a specific diagram type. And if we do this, and open the model with this configuration and have the modeling assistance installed, the assistants will automatically nest the elements in these packages when they are created. So, and when you create a new element, there is another assistant which supports you to prevent the recreation of existing elements. So in this case, I have created a new element, a new capability, which is automatically nested in the capabilities package here, as you can see. And this window allows me to just type a name, and this assistant tells me or shows me all other capabilities with the same or similar name. Yeah, so if I would like to create a disaster management, I see, there is already disaster management. And I just need to double click on it, and the new created element gets substituted, so it will be deleted, and the existing element will be substituting the new element at this place here. Okay, so this is how you can completely automate a specific method. Okay, and that's it. If you have more questions, visit our webpage, sparksystems.training, or just...
Or currently in Slack.
So we will be available also in Slack. So yeah, if you have time and would like to chat with us, we will be in Slack. Otherwise, just visit the page or drop us an email at peterlieber@sparksystems.eu or horskagel@sparksystems.eu. Thank you.
Thank you for attending.
Thank you so much, Peter and Horst. Thanks for the wonderful session. So Peter is already answering the questions in Slack. We could do that. Audience, thanks for your time and attention. If anyone having any remaining questions, please feel free to continue the discussion on our Slack channel, where the speakers and the team will be available to provide further answers. The next session starts in 30 minutes by Philip and Daniel from Lever in the topic Model Versioning and Variant Management for Sustainable Product Line Engineering. Looking forward for the session. Thank you so much, Peter and Horst. Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao.